In 1939, scientists around the world made a discovery that would forever change the nature of war: the power of the atom. German physicists Otto Hahn and Fritz Strassmann discovered nuclear fission, the process of splitting uranium atoms to release enormous amounts of energy. This scientific breakthrough was both revolutionary and terrifying. It meant that whoever mastered atomic energy first could build a weapon of unimaginable power, a bomb capable of destroying entire cities. As World War II began, both sides knew that the race to build such a weapon had begun. In the United States, it would later become the Manhattan Project. In Nazi Germany, it became known as the Uranverein, the Uranium Club. Under the direction of physicist Werner Heisenberg, Germany began its own nuclear research program. But there was one vital ingredient needed to make the atomic bomb possible: something called heavy water. Heavy water, or deuterium oxide, is a special form of water where the hydrogen atoms are replaced with deuterium, an isotope twice as heavy. In nuclear reactors, heavy water acts as a moderator, slowing down neutrons so that a chain reaction can be sustained. Without it, Germany's nuclear research could not advance, and there was only one place in the world producing heavy water in significant quantities: a remote hydroelectric plant in southern Norway, in the town of Vemork, near Rjukan. The Norsk hydro plant, perched on a mountain ledge, was a modern engineering marvel. But in 1940, Nazi Germany invaded Norway and took control of the plant. Soon, the heavy water produced there was being shipped directly to Germany, and Allied intelligence knew it. The Allies realized that as long as the Germans had access to Vemork's heavy water, Hitler's scientists might one day succeed in building an atomic bomb. It had to be stopped. In 1942, the British decided to strike the Vemork plant. The mission was called Operation Freshman, and it would be carried out by British paratroopers using gliders. Their task was to land in the mountains near Rjukan, join Norwegian resistance fighters, and destroy the plant. It was bold but dangerous. On the night of November 19, 1942, 2 gliders took off from Scotland, towed by bombers, but the weather turned against them. Strong winds, freezing temperatures, and poor visibility caused both gliders to crash before reaching their target. Many men died on impact. Others were captured by the Germans. In a chilling act of brutality, the captured commandos were executed under Hitler's commando order, which demanded that all captured Allied saboteurs be killed immediately. Operation Freshman had failed. But unknown to the Germans, the Allies were not finished. After the failure of Operation Freshman, the Special Operations Executive, or SOE, decided to rely on men who knew the land. Norwegians trained in Britain who could blend into their homeland and strike with precision. The new mission would be called Operation Gunnerside. 6 Norwegian commandos were chosen. Their leader was Joachim Ronneberg, a young officer only 23 years old. His team included Knut Haukelid, Fredrik Kaiser, Kasper Edlund, Birger Strömsheim, Tronstad, and Torfinn Bjørnstad, all highly trained in survival, sabotage, and skiing. Their orders were simple but nearly impossible: sneak into Nazi-occupied Norway, locate the heavy water facility at Vemork, infiltrate it, and destroy its production equipment without being caught. Before the Gunnerside team could begin, they needed to contact another small group of Norwegians already operating in the area, the Grouse Team. The Grouse Team had been parachuted into Norway months earlier to prepare landing zones for the failed Operation Freshman. After Freshman's disaster, they had survived in the mountains through one of the harshest winters on record. For months, they lived on moss, lichens, and the occasional reindeer they hunted with stolen rifles. When Ronneberg and his men finally parachuted into Norway on the night of February 16, 1943, the Grouse Team, now renamed Swallow, guided them safely across the snow-covered plateau known as the Hardangervidda. The terrain was unforgiving: blizzards, sub-zero temperatures, and deep snow. Yet the Norwegians pressed on, carrying weapons and explosives across 300 kilometers of wilderness. By late February, they were finally ready. The Vemork plant was no easy target. It stood on a cliffside, surrounded by steep gorges, icy rivers, and German guards. There was only one bridge leading to it, heavily guarded, illuminated by floodlights, and patrolled day and night. A direct assault would be suicide, so the Gunnerside team decided to come from below, climbing down the ravine and crossing the frozen river, then scaling the opposite cliff to reach a cable tunnel leading into the plant. They studied maps, memorized guard rotations, and prepared their explosives. Each man carried a cyanide capsule, a grim reminder that capture was not an option. It was the night of February 27th, 1943. The wind howled across the mountains as the men began their descent toward the valley below Vemork. They moved silently through the snow, avoiding the bridge and its guards. At the bottom of the ravine, they crossed the icy Mona River, crawling across the snow in darkness. On the far side, they found the cable tunnel that led into the plant, a maintenance route the Germans thought too difficult to be used. Inside, the commandos found themselves just a few meters away from the main production chambers. Carefully, they cut through a locked gate and entered the basement where the heavy water cells were stored. They worked quickly and quietly, placing explosive charges on the high-pressure vessels used for electrolysis. They used plastic explosives with time pencils, set to detonate after they escaped. One of the men even found a German guard sleeping in a nearby room. They left him unharmed. Their orders were clear: minimize casualties. At 12:45 a.m., the charges were set. The team slipped away into the darkness. Minutes later, explosions ripped through the basement. The heavy water cells were destroyed, and 500 kilograms of heavy water, months of production, were lost. The mission had succeeded. When the explosions went off, German guards rushed to the plant. They found the damage extensive, but no sign of the attackers. They assumed British commandos had been dropped nearby and launched massive searches across southern Norway. But the Gunnerside team had already vanished into the mountains. They split into smaller groups. Some made their way hundreds of kilometers across snow-covered plateaus to neutral Sweden. Others stayed behind to assist the Norwegian resistance. They skied through blizzards, slept in snow caves, and survived on almost no food. But none were captured. Every man from the Gunnerside team survived. The Nazi leadership was furious. In Berlin, Albert Speer, Hitler's Minister of Armaments, demanded answers. Reinhard Heydrich was already dead, and now the Reich's nuclear ambitions were dealt a devastating blow. Repairs began quickly, and production eventually resumed, but at a fraction of its previous capacity. The Allies, however, were not content to risk another resurgence. Later bombing raids by the US Army Air Forces damaged the plant further. When the Germans decided to move the remaining heavy water to Germany by ferry, Norwegian saboteurs struck again, sinking the ferry hydro on Lake Tinsjø in 1944. The heavy water barrel sank with it, disappearing into the cold depths. With that, Germany's atomic dream was over. The members of Operation Gunnerside returned home as heroes. Joachim Rønneberg, who had led the team, rarely spoke about the mission for decades. When he did, he downplayed his role, saying simply, "We did what we had to do." Knut Haukelid continued to fight with the Norwegian resistance and played a vital role in sinking the heavy water ferry. Others went on to serve in various resistance operations until the end of the war. Their courage and precision had accomplished what entire armies could not, stopping Hitler's atomic ambitions without firing a single shot. Operation Gunnerside remains one of the most successful sabotage missions in history. It combined perfect planning, bravery, and deep local knowledge with a moral clarity rarely seen in war. Had the operation failed, Germany might have gained enough time and material to continue its atomic research with unpredictable consequences for the outcome of the war. In the post-war years, Allied scientists confirmed just how critical the sabotage had been. Werner Heisenberg himself admitted that the loss of the V-Mork facility crippled Germany's nuclear program. The mission was later dramatized in books and films, most famously The Heroes of Telemark in 1965, and again in modern documentaries. But beyond legend and fiction, the truth remains it was not technology or vast armies that stopped Hitler's atomic project. It was a handful of young men, armed with courage and a few pounds of explosives. In the end, Operation Gunnerside was not just about destroying a factory. It was about defending the future of humanity from the threat of total destruction. 6 men, skiing through the bitter Norwegian winter, stood between the world and the possibility of a Nazi atomic bomb. They had no guarantee of success, no hope of rescue, and no thought of fame. They acted because it was right, because they believed freedom and life itself were worth any risk. Their story is a reminder that sometimes the fate of millions can rest in the hands of a few brave souls. Operation Gunnerside was more than sabotage. It was a triumph of courage, intelligence, and moral conviction, a small light burning bright against the darkness of tyranny. And in that light, history found one of its greatest victories.